What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 10 of Preloaded, the podcast dedicated to previewing and talking about all of the biggest and most exciting upcoming video games. My name is Josh Finderup, and I am joined, as always, by the other half of Preloaded, Jackson Vanover. How are you doing this week, Jackson?
I'm doing great, Josh. We've got a lot of next-gen stuff to talk about and Valhalla previews to get into.
Yeah, it was a busy week. We got a ton of news, including PlayStation 5 UI first impressions and the first look, I guess. We got a Cyberpunk and Night City Wire that we're going to talk about, and a ton of other news. So you want to stay tuned for all of that. But first, Preloaded posts every Monday. We post the video version over on Jackson's YouTube channel. And if you may have noticed, rather, that we also posted the video version to my YouTube channel this week. This is the first time we've done this. And just to give you a heads up, we're doing this to just expand our reach. We're really looking for ways to grow our audience. So we appreciate every one of you who watch on either of our YouTube channels. If you are discovering for the first time via my channel, welcome to Preloaded. We're really glad to have you. But if you prefer to listen, you can also catch the audio version over on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. And if you are listening on any of those platforms, we'd love for you to leave a 5-star review. Speaking of growing our audience, probably the biggest thing you could do for us is just drop a review, or if you are feeling generous, you could leave a written review telling people why you like listening to the show. You can also write into Preloaded at the email address preloadedpodcast@gmail.com. And we welcome all of your feedback, all of your thoughts, but we'd love to also get your questions. Every week at the end of the show, we dig into our mailbag. So if there's anything you want to hear Jackson and I talk about on the show the following week, write in and send us your questions. And speaking of questions, we're going to kick off the show this week with our segment, Who the Hell Are These Guys? This is where Jackson and I answer a question about our gaming preferences, our gaming history, to help you, our audience, get to know us as gamers. And the question that we are going to answer this week is, what is your favorite trend in recent games or in the games industry that you hope continues? So that was a lot of talking, Jackson. I'm going to kick it over to you. What's your answer?
All right. Thank you, Josh, for that question. And my answer is going to be wholesome this week. It's going to be the good vibes on social media. I feel like, the console wars, that whole thing has never really been driven by the publishers and the people who make consoles. But at the same time, I feel like in the last several years, we've seen Sony, we've seen Microsoft, we've seen Nintendo kind of, even though they're still doing their own thing. They're all kind of coexisting and being supportive of one another. And I feel like that lends itself to the community also being a little more supportive, not nearly as toxic, I feel like, as it has been. So that's the recent trend that I'd like to see continue, just the good vibes.
That is awesome. Yeah, I mean, we all have seen the negative stuff that can pop up on social media, so I second that completely. That is a great trend, and I hope it not only continues, but gets even more prevalent.
Absolutely.
That's a great answer. So I'm going to kind of take it in the other direction. There's actually a trend that is in older games that I hope comes back. So not to derail this question, but I really miss the days when kind of action-adventure games had contained levels. I think the last time we've really seen this was in the Uncharted games, but even going back further than that, games like Tomb Raider, where you'd get into a contained experience for each level. It'd have a beginning, middle, and end, and then you'd move on to the next level. And I feel like, as much as I love open world games, it's one of my favorite genres. And even games like The Last of Us, which you could argue has levels. It's more of like one narrative thread throughout the entire game. And I miss that. It's kind of an old school design philosophy in games, but I just played Mario 64, and that has totally contained levels where you get to tackle each one at a time and then move on to the next. And I miss that. Maybe I'm old school.
That's a great answer, because the moment that you brought that up, I felt the same. It feels like sometimes games are projecting this watered down version that is not quite open world, but not quite linear level design. And then you have these wide linear levels like The Last of Us Part 2. So I would love to see that back too. That's a great answer.
Yeah, so interesting stuff. We are now going to move on to our Out This Week section. Every week, we look at the games that are coming out the week that we post the podcast, starting on Monday and moving on through Friday. And this week, it's a very light week, but there are some games of note. The first one comes out on Tuesday, October 20th, and that's Amnesia Rebirth. Now, these games they have kind of gone under the radar in the past. I feel like they're pretty much, I think, only on PC. But this comes out for PlayStation 4 and PC. And if you're into horror games, you're looking for something spooky to play on pre-Halloween, these games are fantastic.
Yeah, they're terrifying.
Yes, they are. And next is Doom Eternal, The Old Gods Part 1. This is the first story expansion that's coming out for Doom. Really exciting that they're continuing to support this game with some single-player DLC. This comes out for PS4, Xbox One, PC on Tuesday, October 20th as well. And then lastly, another expansion, Pokemon Sword and Shield, The Crown Tundra, which comes out, of course, for Switch on Thursday, October 22nd. Now, I don't anticipate you'll be getting into Pokemon, but Jackson, are you going to get into Doom, The Old Gods?
How dare you assume that, Josh? First off.
Yeah, that was...
Second off, The Old Gods... Oh, it's just one of those issues of time. I really want to. I thought Doom Eternal was great, and I thought that the trailer for The Old Gods was awesome. I love what the new Dooms project in terms of their, personality. But I don't know if I'm going to have time for this.
Yeah, me neither. There's a lot coming up. We're just coming up on Watch Dogs Legion, and once that game hits, man, it's just a nonstop barrage of games. So I'm right there with you. But yeah, Doom Eternal, if you haven't played it, one of the best games of the year.
It really is.
Yep. So now that we've looked ahead, let's look back with our review roundup. Every week we look at the games that came out the prior week, and we go to OpenCritic to check out their review scores. This week, there are only 2 games that got new review scores that we thought were worth covering. The first is Age of Empires 3 Definitive Edition. If you're into real-time, top-down strategy games, this is a classic. It has 80% average critic rating and a 68% recommended. 68% of critics who've played it have recommended it. And then Torchlight 3, another top-down game, but this is a hack-and-slash RPG kind of loot-style game, kind of in the vein of Diablo. And it has a 65% average, and 11% of critics recommended it. A really surprising score there.
It is, and I dove into some of the sentiments on why that was, and people said that, or the reviewers said, that the first 2 games sort of push the envelope in terms of that genre, whereas Torchlight 3 really doesn't. And so there's almost not a reason to invest in the new one because it doesn't do what the first 2 did, which is disappointing.
Yeah, that's really too bad for fans of those games because I know Torchlight 2 is a fan favorite.
Yeah, it is disappointing, yeah.
Yeah, so... with that, we are going to take our first break, and when we get back, we are going to dig into a ton of PlayStation 5 hardware news. I guess software too, if you count the UI. So exciting stuff. You want to stick around. We'll be right back. And welcome back. We are now going to get into our Week in Previews segment. This is where Jackson and I cover all of the news that came out about games that are coming out in the near and sometimes not too near future, as well as news about the new consoles that are coming out in the very near future. And that is what we're going to kick things off with this week. So not long after we recorded last week's show, they came out with a bunch of news about the backwards compatibility and just compatibility overall. And since this is kind of old news, I'm going to run through this very quickly. I think the biggest things that people need to be aware of is that, well, first off, they did talk about how select PS4 games will feature boost mode, and that this will up the resolution on certain games and the fidelity. Next, and I think this is overlooked, I didn't hear this a lot of places, PSVR will only be compatible on the PS5 if you have a PS4 camera. So if you pre-ordered the PS5 camera thinking you were going to be able to use that for VR, you will not. So you'll want to fix whatever you need to there, use your old camera or buy a PS4 camera. Next, they did mention that game saves will transfer from the PS4 to the PS5. And there are some details here that they covered. I'm not going to get into it. One important thing, though, is this won't be true for every game, as it's up to the developers to make this happen. And then lastly, they did cover which games are not backwards compatible on the PS4 or on the PS5, and it's a very short list. It's 10 games, and they are, some of these I hadn't even heard of: DWVR, Afro Samurai 2 Revenge of Kuma Volume 1, TT Isle of Man Ride on the Edge 2, Just Deal With It, Shadow Complex Remastered, Robinson The Journey, We Sing Hitman Go Definitive Edition, Shadow N, and Joe's Diner. So before I get into the next bit here, anything to add to this, Jackson?
All I have to say is that I'm very disappointed that Joe's Diner is not going to be playable on my PS5.
Yeah, Joe's Diner, and for me, it had to have been Afro Samurai 2 Revenge of Kuma Volume 1. Actually, no joking aside, I do have Shadow Complex Remastered on my PS4. I never played it, so that may remain on my backlog indefinitely.
I feel like you're part of the percent of a percent of a percent of people that has one of these games that it's truly being affected, even though you haven't played it.
Yeah, so anyways, that, again, that's kind of old news. What we just got this morning, totally shadow dropped on us. Nobody saw that. Well, I think people saw it coming, but nobody knew about it. Was that PlayStation dropped a state of play where they revealed the UI for the PlayStation 5. So everybody was really looking forward to this. We finally got to see it. And so right away we saw that this does confirm the leak that we saw a couple weeks back, which we covered on this show, where they showed the amount of storage space that you'll have in the unit after, or once you get it, basically. And it was something like 665 gigabytes. That wasn't shown in this state of play, but just the fact that the UI was the same in both in the leak and this presentation, that kind of confirms that information.
It does, and I'm glad that it does, because the leak looked good, and this video, if you guys haven't seen it, you need to go check out like what it looks like for yourself. I'm sure we've got some B-roll playing right now, but it looks incredible.
Yeah, and then what they showed today, I thought looked really good. I was happy with it. So it started with what they're calling the control center, and this is a menu you can bring up in the middle of a game. You press the PlayStation button or the PS button, and it immediately pops up these cards, and each of the cards does something different. And again, it does pause the gameplay, but you don't have to exit the game to get here. It even shows up in the background, as I'm sure, like Jackson said, we're probably showing this in B-roll. But anyway, each of these cards, like I said, does something different. And I thought some of them were really cool, like activities. You can now select games. I'm sure not every game will have this, but certainly first-party games and hopefully most major games. You can open up an activities card and it'll show you what you have done to complete a certain objective and what you have left to do, which I think is just awesome. Like, that's just a great way to... It's not a walkthrough per se, but it definitely helps you kind of figure out where to go.
Sure. And I actually don't know the answer to this question, Josh. Are objectives connected to trophies directly? Like, I'm not exactly sure what these are. Are they just completely separate?
I don't know. Okay. My impression from looking at this was that they are separate, but there was this kind of like a confirmation last week. I think it was on some foreign site, like a French website, popped up some information that confirmed that trophies will have tracking, so you can track how much you have to do to obtain a trophy.
Okay.
But I don't know. And then they actually took that down really quickly. So people are kind of wondering if it's legit or not. But anyway, it's possible that that's part of this, but I don't know.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I found the player estimate on how long it'll take to complete based on your habits as a gamer is really fast. That's like some AI learning, machine learning, I feel like.
Yeah, very cool. And along these lines, there was also an option where you actually can get help. Certain games will have little videos that you can play if you're wondering how, or if you don't know how to do something, or if you're having trouble, they'll have a little video that shows where you need to go in order to complete an objective. So you will actually be able to get in-game help. And I think that they mentioned that this was for PS Plus members only, which is interesting. Yeah,
it's like a premium feature. I wonder if PlayStation's going to roll other features of the PS5 into that.
Yeah. They also covered some voice chat functionality. It's really simple to open, I guess, like it seemed to focus around the party functionality, but there was voice chat. One very interesting feature here is that if you have friends that you're chatting with or talking to, you can share your screen with them, and then they'll see your gameplay in this little window, and you can watch what they're doing as they're doing it. I don't really know what the main benefit is going to be for this, but it's still pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't see myself as a user doing this, but if you've ever been someone that's accidentally pressed the picture-in-picture button on your remote, like old school TV remotes, that's what it's like.
Yeah. So they did get also into the create functionality or the create button functionality, but I'm pretty sure they didn't cover this extensively or in full because they basically showed that you can share like 4K captures. But and they did say that your PS5 is recording gameplay as you play, which I think is pretty standard nowadays. But they didn't talk about any like how you can share socially on like Twitter or YouTube or wherever you might post this stuff, which I was a little disappointed not to see that.
I think generally speaking, it's similar, and that's probably why they didn't touch on it specifically. But they did show that you can send those pictures within your parties. So if you take a cool screenshot or a clip and you want to send it within your party, but you don't want to use the screencast function, you can do that. So it's interesting.
Yeah. The next few things I'll run through pretty quickly. They also showed the home screen, which is, when I believe this is when you're outside of a game or if you're not within any game, this is basically what you'll see like when you boot up your PlayStation. And it has, each game does have its own hub. This is similar to what we see on the PlayStation 4, where you can like see your activities, you can see other players' activities, you can see like, I'm assuming if anybody's streaming, you'll be able to jump in to watch that. Stuff like that will be on this hub for each game. There's also an explore function. And this, actually, Jackson, I'm drawing a blank here. Do you remember exactly what this is?
Yes. So this is essentially kind of an everything screen. So this will kind of mix everything you can expect. It's got official stories from PlayStation, like press media stuff that they're putting out, trending media from the community. And also they said specifically that the Explore screen on the home or tab on the home screen will not be available for everyone on launch. So
yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, they're like testing it, but I'm not exactly sure. It's kind of wishy-washy on exactly what the purpose of this screen is to me.
Yeah, and they did mention a few times that just this whole UI experience is something that is going to be changing. They're going to be updating it, which I think is great. It probably won't look like it does now in a year or two. So that's good news. The last two things, there's the PlayStation Store, whereas this was a separate app on the PlayStation 4. It's now integrated into the operating system. It's not an app. I don't really know what that means, but take that for what it's worth. And then lastly, they showed some kind of functionality for when you do share a screenshot. I thought the most interesting thing here is that if you need to type some text to accompany your screenshot, like anybody who's posted a screenshot directly from the PS4 to Twitter knows it's cumbersome to type. Well, this UI features text to type, so you can just talk and the microphone in your controller will pick it up, and that's super convenient.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking that we haven't had that before, and now that it's here, it's like, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. So anyway, that was a lot of stuff to cover. My impressions were positive of this. I think it looks good. I wasn't expecting anything groundbreaking or mind-blowing, so this kind of met my expectations. What about you?
Absolutely. It looks very slick and clean. That's something you always expect from Sony and PlayStation, and it met my expectation there.
Nice. Yeah. So we also got some Series X, some Xbox Series X news this week. So we're all over the place in terms of next-gen news. Jackson, for these next two previews here, do you mind if I kick it over to you?
Sure, absolutely. For Xbox Series X, Game Informer gave us a deep dive into their second round, their second wave of impressions. As we know, press has had Xbox Series X for several weeks now, I want to say. And so we've been seeing all kinds of little tidbits, but now they're kind of unveiling a little bit more. We got to learn more about quick resume. That seems to be the big topic the past week. The fact that you can swap between games very quickly. I would say around 10 seconds is what it takes to swap between multiple games that all are just kind of simultaneously running in the background. And the thing is, this works even after unplugging your Xbox Series X. So you can have it in one room, take it to another room, plug it back in, and it still has the same level of quick resume that you would have had if you hadn't done that. Now, this is just, I don't see a practical purpose for that in terms of unplugging it. That is just like wow, this tech is really cool, quality.
If your power goes out,
There you go.
I mean, yeah.
If your power goes out, you're not going to lose progress. So that's a great point, Josh. I didn't even think about that. But just in general, if you're someone, I grew up in between two houses growing up, so I would constantly move my Xbox back and forth. If you're someone like that, this is great. So I can see a few little practical things there, but just overall, quick resume is great. Moving on from there, they showed off some next-gen loading times, and they had some mixed results on this. Yakuza was really quick. It was 5 seconds. Gears 5 took 10 seconds to load. I just assumed from pressing the button in the home screen to playing the game. And then Dirt 5 and Gears Tactics each took 17 seconds. So it sounds like there's going to be a disparity on games, which is something you already expect, but it's not like 17 seconds is long. You just would think that it would be quicker. And I agree with the impressions, the person who wrote that up on there.
Yeah, it's like 17 seconds does sound like a long time, but then you can play some games where it takes a minute or longer to load the whole game. So yeah, we don't have any comparisons on these games for the Xbox One X, but it'd be interesting to know like what Dirt 5 how long it would take to load on the old gen consoles.
Yeah, it would be good to have a comparison there. But going through the rest of these impressions, they talked about the controller. They said the grips feel good. The share button is great. That's something we pretty much just missed on the last gen Xbox. So the fact that that's there is good. D-pad feels more precise. Overall, it's a definite improvement, but not as big of a leap from 360 to One, which is fine. Like, don't fix what isn't broken, in my opinion. So that was good to see the UI experience on Xbox. While we got some PS5 news, we also got a little bit more about the Xbox interface. And Xbox did a whole store overhaul and UI overhaul in general. It's been changing a lot, I've noticed, in the past few years. But they said that the experience is very smooth, and it actually does benefit from the newer hardware, which is something you would hope for. Final little thing on these impressions, the storage expansion card. This person said that if you want to pay the $220 for the Microsoft branded card, it behaves identically to the games on internal storage, which is a good thing. They kind of noted like it almost feels necessary because of how big games are, which is a bit of a bummer. But at the same time, it's good to know that it feels functional and like it's not even an extension. It's part of the internal, storage.
Yeah, that's very good news.
But yeah, very interesting that we're getting, tons of information on both next-gen consoles this week.
Yeah, I'm really excited. This just makes me more excited to get my consoles. I'm really I got my Xbox Series X through Amazon, so I'm like kind of on pins and needles. Am I going to get it on day one? But if I am, I'm really excited to test these load times out, see again, the UI, how that's changed. And I did not get a storage card. I'm hedging my bets that I'll have enough storage space for at least what I need to play on day one. But who knows? Maybe I'll just have enough games that I'll need to go out and get one, and hopefully they're not sold out everywhere.
I hope so too. And I think I'm fortunate enough to have fast internet. I know not everyone in America does. I mean, internet kind of sucks here. I know it's even worse in places like Australia, but I'm fine. Like, if I want to take down a few games and download a couple more, that's something that I'm able to do, but I know that not everyone is. So yeah, I guess it's time to move into our Dirt 5 preview.
Take it away. This was not something I did watch the Digital Foundry video, but I'm not terribly familiar with this information here.
Yeah, I'm just gonna kind of gloss over a lot of this stuff. But we saw some gameplay of Dirt 5 running on Xbox Series X, and it's great to just have a direct comparison, and that's essentially what we got with this video that we're referring to. It showed off the frame rate mode on Xbox Series X, and you got dynamic 4K and 60 FPS, which is something that I think a lot of people are looking for out of next gen. So it's great to see that in action. There's an image quality mode, which gives you dynamic 4K 60 FPS, but with improved visuals, but it drops down to 1800p. So if that's something you're okay sacrificing in terms of resolution for better visuals, then you can go down that route. And then you've got performance mode, which is somewhere between 1080p and 1440p, but it runs at 120 FPS. There's a noticeable dip in the visuals on this version of the game, but man, that frame rate, coming from someone who really, really values the frame rate, that may be something that I check out on if other games offer a performance mode. But outside of that, Dirt 5 has dynamic day and weather cycles, which is, I think, something you're going to see a lot more on next-gen hardware because it's able to facilitate that kind of gameplay.
Yeah, I will say the tracks in this video that if you haven't checked it out, go to Digital Foundry, look at their Dirt 5 preview, and the track textures just look so good with like the weather, the rain, the light coming off of it, and how it changes depending on the time of day. Just really spectacular looking game. And I'm really curious to see what these quote unquote improved visuals are. Like I think we got some news, we might get into this later, but that Spider-Man Miles Morales performance mode has features. That's how you get ray tracing. So I wonder if that's the same here. Will it be actual like visual features that aren't in the frame rate mode, for example?
Right. I anticipate that a lot of great channels like Digital Foundry will show us exactly what's going on there. Because Josh and I, while we have general knowledge, we don't have that very specific technical experience. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yep. Yeah, very interesting. So if you're into racing games, yeah, check out Dirt 5. It does look, at least from a graphical fidelity standpoint, it looks amazing. The next Xbox Series X game that we got a preview for this week was Yakuza Like a Dragon. And I say Xbox Series X because that's what people were playing it on. I do believe that this may eventually be a multi-platform game, but don't quote me on that. Anyhow, for this particular preview, what I really want to cover is just this game looks bonkers. And I know that Yakuza is known for being quirky and weird, but this looks really out there and in a great way. So if you don't know, Yakuza typically is like a beat 'em up. It's like an open world beat 'em up game. I'm being incredibly reductive there, so don't come at me too hard if I'm missing the point of this game. I've not played them, but the difference for this particular entry to the series is that they've ditched the real-time beat 'em up combat for turn-based RPG style combat. And indeed, this does look like a full-fledged RPG, but the jobs they have a job system kind of adding on to the RPG elements, and the jobs that they have are what really caught my attention. They're hilarious. You can, so in like typical RPGs, particularly JRPGs, you can assign jobs, and they're usually like you're a paladin or you're a warrior, you know. And in this game, you can assign like a chef as your job, so like actual jobs, and then you are wearing an apron, a chef's hat, and your weapons are these two spatulas, which is awesome. It gets even weirder. If you choose the homeless guy job, you then have an ability called pigeon control, which I have no idea what that does, and you have another called smelly breath. So that sets the tone for what this game is going to be like. My curiosity is piqued. I may check out Yakuza if I have time at some point, you know, end of this year, early next year. We'll see.
Yeah. So Josh, have you played the Yakuza games ever?
No, but a few of the podcasts I listen to definitely go in detail on them. There's some fans of this game that I'm just, you know, in terms of like social media people I'm connected to. And so my familiarity comes from that. I do know a little bit.
Okay. I haven't played them, but the extent of my knowledge is kind of similar to yours. I've watched some streams of them, and then I've watched some impressions on Yakuza Like a Dragon, and it just looks like a very, very light game. And this one seems to take what people really like and just push it even further. And like you said, with the jobs, the assignments, that really reminds me almost of the South Park RPGs, where you have these bananas, insane classes that don't make any sense, but they're so creative that they're kind of endearing. So Yakuza Like a Dragon, definitely not a game I see myself touching for a while, but if it's, you know, if it's out there and it's, you know, on Game Pass maybe in the future, like I'd absolutely check it out.
Yeah. Humor is tough to get right in video games. Not that I would know. I've never made a video game, but you don't see a lot of games that get humor right. South Park was among the ones that do, and hopefully this one does. For people who appreciate this type of tone, it looks like it could be a really fun game. Speaking of really fun games, the next one we're talking about, you and I are going to get into our hands-on impressions of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, but we also got a big info dump from two outlets, Game Informer and IGN this week. So Ubisoft is kind of pulling out all the stops, giving people a ton of information. And for Game Informer, what we learned is a little bit more about how the story of this game unfolds. There are three main arcs, one for Eivor, one for the clan that you're a member of, the Viking clan you're a member of as a whole, and then there's one for kind of like the larger conflict in the game. And they also talked about how, unlike previous games that have kind of like one solid narrative thread, this game has each of these arcs has kind of multiple threads that you'll get the initial quest at your settlement. You'll go out, you'll complete the objectives, then you'll go back to your settlement and get another, kind of story arc to complete. And you'll see that, I think, in our preview. But that was interesting. They also talked a little bit about the hidden ones and the enemies with the Order, or is it the Order of the Ancients?
Yes.
What are they called?
Order of the Ancients.
Okay. Which is the Assassins and the Templars. And those are definitely in this game, but you're not necessarily aligned with one or the other 100%. So that's interesting. We'll see how those dynamics play out. And then we also learned that this game will have a hit list, as I'm calling it, I guess, is so similar to Odyssey, where you had that list of people in the cult. Can't remember what the cult was called, but that you had to assassinate them. A similar hit list will appear in Valhalla. And then lastly, IGN released these kind of cheesy marketing videos about like become a Viking, and they did reveal some new footage that we hadn't seen. What I found particularly interesting about these was the mythical realms that we got to see. You get to go to Asgard, and you get to fight these enemies called frost giants. These are via hallucinations. So in typical Ubisoft style, you'll take some hallucinogens and you'll get to go do all this supernatural stuff. So that was, again, I went on for quite a while. What were your impressions of all this information, Jackson?
First of all, overwhelmed because Josh and I played the game, and then we knew that we could share information publicly, but we didn't know, like, oh my gosh, that all of this stuff would come out. And I believe this was a day before our embargo lifted. So overwhelmed. And then I didn't add this to the doc. We can talk about this later in our preview, but Ubisoft released another trailer yesterday from when we're recording this. Jeez. And it unveiled even more information that we actually just did not know about. So lot to cover, but yeah, I appreciated that this showed off more of the, like you said, Josh, the mythical worlds and sort of that aspect of the game where you're really leaning into the Norse, not even mythology, but culture and what they believed, and talking to a seer and taking something that'll make you trip and make you imagine things are happening. So very interesting stuff.
Yeah, it looks really cool. And going on to another upcoming open world game, we're gonna get so many open world games. We got some Spider-Man Miles Morales news this week. So Game Informer, again, that's their cover story this month. So we're getting a lot of information, and this I'm sure we'll get more information as the weeks move on. But we got to see the first boss battle from the game, and this shows Peter Parker fighting alongside Miles, which I think might be the first time we've seen both of those characters in their suits on screen together, and they're fighting Rhino, who we fought in Spider-Man for the PS4. So that and it looked great. We get to see some of Miles Morales' powers where he can manipulate electricity. So I guess I did my research, and that is his superpower. Is he's got these electric, I don't know what to call it, but he can use electricity, and it looks awesome. This kind of yellow glowing shocks that he sends out. And then we got some screenshots which look gorgeous, and some other stuff that we got via GameSpot, who I guess dug deep into the Game Informer coverage. I don't have the digital version of the magazine, so I couldn't get in. But what GameSpot noted is that Miles Morales will feature some surprise villains that haven't yet been announced. I think that's not a huge surprise there. And then overall, this is a direct quote. Overall, the sequel promises to be more than just a reskin of the 2018 game, with improvements on gameplay and whole new features such as, and this is why I put this in here, quote, a friendly neighborhood spider app. So you will have an app on, I'm guessing, your phone. And then there's a video that if you haven't seen, you got to check it out. There's a mission where you can recover a backpack that literally has someone's cat in it, and the cat is named Spider-Man. You bring it back to them, and then they give you the backpack, which you can take around on missions, and it literally has the cat in it, who has special abilities that, like, the cat literally punches someone in the video. It's awesome. Definitely check it out.
I missed that detail. I saw the screenshots, but I didn't see the video. All of this information, I already knew that I was hyped for Miles Morales, but it makes me even more hyped. the game looks gorgeous, and just in the visuals department, I don't think not Ubisoft, Insomniac gets enough credit for how amazing the engine is in these games. They're just pushing it further. It looks gorgeous.
Yeah, I mean, technically, it's it's a cross-gen game, but we did also learn that, like I said earlier, the performance mode on this, whatever they're calling that, will feature ray tracing, so it should look amazing on the PS5.
Yeah, and just the friendly neighborhood spider app, that gets my mind racing. Is that just like a randomly generated, like, I need your help, Spider-Man, come help me system? Who knows?
Yeah, they didn't release any other details that I saw. Maybe if you saw some, drop it in the comments to let us know, but that is some interesting information. And the last game we got a big info drop about this week was Cyberpunk, which was just this morning as we're recording this show. We saw episode 4 of their Night City Wire series, and this it started by covering the cars of the game, and I have to say, I thought they looked awesome. I love the aesthetic of the cars. They covered a bunch of different kind of classes of vehicles. There's economy, which are cheap beaters, basically, just, their economy. Executive, which is the opposite. Those are like big, huge, like I'll call them, they look like the Cadillacs of the future, I guess. Then there's heavy duty, which are like armored vehicles, sport cars, which are what they sound like, and then hypercars, which are also what they sound like, the fastest cars you'll likely be able to get in the game. They did cover motorcycles, but they didn't say whether this was a separate class or whether there'll be motorcycles for each class. And then they also said that there are, quote, automotive icons. The one that they revealed was Johnny Silverhand's 100-year-old Porsche. So did you get a chance to check this out this morning, Jackson?
I did. These cars, I echo what you said. They look gorgeous. But more than anything, I'll talk about this later when we talk about Cyberpunk, but I got a general vibe that this is just a real world. And that's what I appreciated most about these cars, actually. Like the economy cars. A lot of games just give you the fastest cars. Like, whoa, look, this is such a cool car. But then you've got these, it's real. And it just projects a feeling that you are in a breathing, living world. So that's what I loved about these cars.
Yeah, and I just want to add, I love the they look like they're from the 80s, but also from the future.
Yeah.
I just love that 80s vibe that they had. At least that's what I took away from it.
They nailed the aesthetic.
Yep. So they then got into, they did talk about like how they record the sound and stuff, but no new gameplay was revealed there. They did get into the styles that we see in the game. Again, no real gameplay here, but we just got a look at the aesthetic. And I will admit that maybe more than any other Night City Wire, just really getting a look at the look of this game got me more excited about it.
I'm right there with you. Just what I said about the cars, that I felt that with the styles. It's just that there are different classes of society all meshed together in this one place, but all within this same cyberpunk aesthetic. It's believable. It's really unique as well. And so it just got me that much more hyped. It's amazing how CD Projekt Red is able to continue upping the ante for me.
Yeah, I can't wait for this game. I hate to say it, but with everything I've got planned for my channel, I may not get to this game at launch. I may have to wait a little bit, but it is going to be an unbelievable game. It does come out, as you know, November 19th. We also got news that it comes out on Stadia the same day. So if you're one of the 5 people that are going to play this game on Stadia, it comes out day and date. So that's good news.
Oh, that's brutal, Josh.
Dude, I am not a fan of Stadia. I have it, and it is not worth, in my opinion, this is definitely subjective, but it is not worth it. I can't go easy on Stadia, especially after what Amazon revealed for their streaming service. So take that for what it's worth. We also got news that there will be a Night City Wire episode 5, so we don't know when that'll be, but look forward to that.
Yeah, it should be right before launch.
Yep. And then moving on, we have some quick hits. Jackson, did you want to cover these?
Sure. Really quickly, Rockstar bought Ruffian Games, the developer of Crackdown 2, and they rebranded it to Rockstar Dundee. Nothing really to add to that story other than Rockstar had an acquisition, which is very, very far and few between. So look forward to whatever they put out in the future. Next up, Ken Levine, who led Irrational Games, who made BioShock and BioShock 2 or BioShock Infinite. His latest game is in the late stages of development at Ghost Story Games. We haven't heard anything from Ken Levine since 2014 when he made this interesting like dev presentation about narrative Legos and how he approaches immersive sims. So this is an immersive sim sci-fi game. So just keep it on your radar. We could see this thing in the next couple of years. And then finally, a little more Mass Effect news. Mass Effect Legendary Edition got rated in Korea. So just keep it in the back of your mind. Last thing we heard is that this thing might be coming out early 2021.
I have a very bold prediction to make.
Okay, let's hear it.
Mass Effect Legendary Edition is in fact happening. It's real. I'm just going to put that out there.
All right, you heard it here first. Everyone that talks about it, refer to this episode of the podcast.
Yep. Okay, so with that, we are now going to switch gears, and our topic of the week this week is our deep dive, or rather our deep dive discussion, as we're calling it. This week is our gameplay impressions of Assassin's Creed Valhalla. So both Jackson and I were fortunate enough to play this game last week for 6 full hours apiece. And man, there's just a lot to go over. And since, again, I typically do a lot of the talking on this show, Jackson, I want to kick this over to you first and hear what you thought of Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
All right. So first off, I made a 41-minute long impressions video. So I wanted to plug that. I'm also uploading some gameplay, and I got to interview 3 devs. So look for all of that on my channel if you haven't seen it. But my general impression of Valhalla is that it is, compared to my last demo, so much has improved. The fact that they included the settlement in this demo really gave it a cohesion that the last demo did not have, not even close. Both in the narrative and just what you're doing and kind of the gameplay loop, the cycle of gameplay. You are going out on these story arcs. You're spending several hours with new characters and pushing the plot forward, but you're circling back to your settlement, and that was huge. And the detail in the settlement was so important to me because, as you guys probably know, I have been replaying the games. I talk about it constantly. But I replayed Assassin's Creed 3, and the biggest thing that stuck out to me was the homestead in that game. And the settlement in Valhalla blows the homestead away, which is crazy. And it blows like Monteregione away. It's just so important to everything in this game. That was kind of my big takeaway, Josh. What was yours? I'm curious.
So yeah, for me, this was my first time playing it. So I got my first taste of the combat. I posted a video on my channel as well. It's like the 19 things that I discovered that we didn't previously know. But this is stuff that other people may have discovered before me, obviously. But the combat really does feel, or it did feel different. I recently, as I've mentioned a number of times on the show, played through Odyssey, and I spent a ton of time with that game. But my muscle memory was not enough to carry me through the combat in Valhalla, and that was a result of the dual wielding system, where you have like 2 weapons. You can wield like either 2 axes or a shield and an axe. And just using 2, or rather, I think there are 3 buttons, 3 of the trigger buttons will have different different inputs and execute different attacks. So that took me a little while to get used to. But then when I switched, and my first combat encounter, I almost died. So I switched to a shield and an axe, and man, that shield was a lifesaver. And then parrying also feels a bit different. In Odyssey, you have to like press 2 triggers at once, and in Valhalla, it's I think 1 trigger. But anyway, there are just enough subtle differences that add up to create what felt like a unique combat experience, and that was refreshing for me. And it was a little more challenging. I won't say that this is going to be a tough game on the combat front, but you just have to be a bit more deliberate with your inputs. That was my experience.
I felt that too.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say that combat to me felt more like Origins, and for every reason that you just said, like the parry button, same as Origins, the special ability thing by holding LB, Origins, like it just feels a lot more Origins than Odyssey.
Yeah. But my favorite part of the game was the exploration. So this game kind of takes the exploration mode from Odyssey, where waypoints don't guide you as much as clues that you learn from like NPCs, and then they're listed in the map or even in I think they're actually listed in the top of the screen at all times, these hints and clues that you get. Anyways, there are other ways that Valhalla implements the same kind of lack of hand-holding to guide you along. It lets you discover where to go next and what to do next. And like in one instance, I had to. You probably encountered this too. I had to find the meeting of two rivers. So you open your map and find where those two rivers meet. You go down, and even once you get there, your destination, you're looking for this crypt. That crypt is not marked with a waypoint. You have to really discover where it is for yourself. I love that method of discovery. And then even like there were a couple instances where I found what are called wealth opportunities, these treasure chests, and I could literally see it through a gate, but I couldn't get through the gate. I had to find a back way into the house or into the building, and there were a couple of instances where I just abandoned them because I couldn't find how to get in there, and I was playing this demo. I wanted to move on, but just the fact that not everything in this game is just shown to you, and you have to figure out where to go or how to get certain things. I love that.
I love that too. And I was watching your video and I was like, yes, Josh caught the same thing I did. That same Two Rivers thing was awesome to see. And you went a step further and pointed out like the icon on the screen, the little question mark, that sort of tells you like you have to find out where to go here. It also eliminates the like highlighted zone on the map that we saw in Origins and Odyssey, where it's like use Senu. You still says like use Senu to find the exact location, but it's less handholdy. You said it perfectly, and I also felt like there was a part of me that was thinking the whole wealth mystery artifact thing would kind of grow stale and be like, oh, I know it's going to be one of these things. It really did not, especially with world events. I don't know how many you found, but you really don't know what to expect. Because when you're looking for, like, say, the blue shiny thing on the map, that could be a quest, or that could be a very short activity. So it really does. It kind of sits in that zone of kind of giving you enough to pique your interest, but not revealing the whole thing.
Yeah, speaking of world events, I only did one, and it was this guy on this little island, and he told me that he didn't need this treasure that he had in his house, and he's like, yeah, my house is on the river, and it's right next to a tall tree. That's literally all he told me, and again, no waypoint, so I had to find that house on my own. So same kind of exploration thing. By far, that's my favorite part of the game. I will say it feels enough like the previous games, though, that I think other people have said this too. I don't think there's enough here that's going to, sway people who weren't fans of Odyssey and Origins, but it's not going to feel like you're playing those games over again.
Right. I don't know actually that I would quite agree with that. I think there is enough different. I think that the overall flavor and feel of this game is different enough. I think that you can very easily identify that this is made in the same engine, and that turns some people off. But I don't know, like the settlement and exploration, it just kind of changes things for me. The settlement, there was a lot to do in the settlement. In fact, that's one of the things that's one of the titles in my video. There's a ton to do in your settlement, and that does add a whole other aspect of gameplay. It makes it feel more like an RPG, which is very cool, I think. Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask you specifically about one thing you said in your video. You said that you didn't find a single weapon. Yeah, I did find a helm, and I think some armor, but literally I didn't loot a single weapon in that entire 6-hour demo. And that goes to what some of the devs have said, that they're trying to make it more scarce. I did mention in my video, I wasn't like looting a ton of stuff, but when I killed someone, I looted their body. And when I found a random chest, I would loot it. And I think the one helm I did find was in a wealth opportunity. It was in one of those special chests. So yeah. That's crazy. I found a couple, not to get into specifics, but when I found the king, there were a couple chests in there that had weapons, and I was gonna miss them, and my demoist told me, "Hey, there's a chest in here with a weapon." So that's funny because I was literally like 10 minutes away from the end of the demo when I found the king, and my demoist was like, "Okay, if you want to get to the end of this quest, here's what you got to do. You got to go here, here, here." And so I just rush you through. Okay, I bypassed any loot that I might have found. Yeah, gotcha. Okay, that's where the the loot was hiding. But yeah, what else? Yeah, anything else specific that you wanted to touch on with Valhalla? Well, I was going to mention the settlement, which I thought was cool. Just that the world is more diverse and beautiful than what we saw in the first demo. I was not impressed with the aesthetic of East Anglia.
Someone was very quick to point out in the comments of my video that that is actually how East Anglia looks in real life. So that's important. But the rest of England, it appears, is much more diverse. I saw these colorful fields, and I saw these really beautiful vistas that were really high up. And I saw these snow-capped mountains in the distance, and my demoist said, you can go and explore those mountains. So if you were unimpressed with the visuals that we saw, not the visuals, but the look of the land in the first demo, it gets a lot more interesting.
Did you get a vibe from the vistas of Ghost of Tsushima / Breath of the Wild in terms of world design? Because I definitely felt that in terms of we're going to put you up really high and look at all the stuff that you can actually go to and explore. There's the landscape is dotted with castles and just things that immediately tap into your intrinsic motivation. You're like, I want to go there and see that.
Yeah, definitely Breath of the Wild. I have to say I didn't think of Ghost of Tsushima, but there was a vista. If you watch my video, pretty much in the first section, I think I showed this vista, and you can see off in the distance this spike mountain peak. I mean, it literally looks like a spike just raising up almost miles out of the land, and I'm like, I gotta go there and see what that is.
Yeah.
And that reminded me a lot of Breath of the Wild, where you get really high up and you can see the draw distance in this game is unreal. You can just see far, far off.
Yeah. And I got the chance to interview the art director, Raphael Lacoste, and he told me that the technology that they're able to leverage in the open world games is just they love it because they can deliver those long draw distances. And they were able to specifically make this game. And I told him it looks like a painting, and he was like, wow, that's what we were going for. It looks like a painting at times with the colors and just, whatever they're using to make this thing look the way it does, it's working.
Yep. Yeah, it's going to be beautiful. And I think we were playing, I did ask, we were playing on a very high-end PC, which is kind of what you would imagine they would let us play on. But so your mileage may vary, but I do imagine that if you're playing this on next-gen consoles or PC, it's going to look really good. We'll see what the performance is like on old-gen consoles. That'll be very interesting.
It will be, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but they released the PC specs, and I'm looking at my 1080 Ti that has been running Origins on very high pretty smoothly. I'm not going to chance that, man. I'm going next-gen console. I think I'm going to play it on Series X.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Well, the load time should be, if nothing else, I do remember in Origins, man, sitting through a 20-second load time every time you do a fast travel, or for if you die, we're going to save a lot of time. I imagine at least one of the 100 hours I played that game was just sitting in front of a loading screen. So
right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, those were our impressions of Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I think, I'm very excited to play this game when it comes out, more excited than I was. I don't want to speak for you, Jackson. I imagine you're excited.
We'll see. Yes, I'm excited.
Yeah. So we are now going to take our second break, and when we get back, we're going to talk a little bit about what we have been playing. We'll be right back. And we're back. We are now going to talk about the games we have been playing. I guess we just talked a little bit about this, but have you been playing anything other than Valhalla, Jackson?
I have not had a lot of time to play games. I can speak for both of us when I say the Valhalla preview took a long time. A lot of our time in the past week. I did throw on Dead Space. I'm going to hop on my soapbox for a second. The original Dead Space, I did a backwards compatible Xbox One X version. It's a 360 game. That game reminds me of that franchise and its potential. EA needs to bring back Dead Space. It's one of my favorite survival horror experiences. The mechanics are so sound and unique and solid. And the backdrop of sci-fi horror is just one of my favorite kinds of horror. So off my soapbox, EA, bring back Dead Space.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I did not play the original, but I did play Dead Space 2, and I loved it.
Dead Space 2 is great.
Yeah, but I've heard people say Dead Space 1 is perhaps even better. So maybe if I finish getting... I'll get in. Well, the game I'm still playing is Resident Evil 7, and I'm playing that because it's Halloween, as you can see by the decorations behind me. I'm into Halloween. If I finish Resident Evil 7, maybe Dead Space is the next game I'll play. But still liking Resident Evil, but I haven't had a ton of time to play it. The game that I have been playing the most of is a little game called Adobe Premiere Pro. I have been editing videos, or my last video, I'm a notorious perfectionist, so it takes me a lot of time to make the videos I do, and that's what I've been spending my time with, to be honest.
If that's a game, Josh, I've been playing a lot of that too.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure I have the platinum trophy by now. Anyways, if you like spooky games, I actually think Resident Evil 7 might be one of the scariest games I've played. Like, they do some things in that game that really mess with you, and it's awesome if you like to be spooked out.
I'm right there with you. I actually did boot it up. I was trying to force my girlfriend to play a scary game with me, but she gets motion sick, which I get with this game. It like locks you into that very close-in POV.
Yep.
And it's on purpose because it's terrifying.
It is. I don't know. I think I said this last week. I have no idea how anybody can stand this game in VR. Props to you if you're one of those people.
Yes, you deserve a medal of some kind if you can do that.
Yep. So from that, we are now going to move on to our mailbag. This is where we take one or more of the questions from our audience and answer it here on the show. This week, we are going to take a question from Brian, who asked, do you think the Xbox Series X will be a big enough jump if the television I currently have is a basic 4K non-HDR set? And I have some thoughts about this. So, Brian, I think that there are several reasons to upgrade to next gen. I think for people who are maybe getting their first 4K TV, then absolutely that jump in fidelity will be enough. And if you have a really trained eye, then yes. But if you're like me, where honestly the jump from like whatever my PlayStation 4 Pro shows, which is not true 4K to 4K, native 4K, for me, isn't going to make a massive difference. But I'm in it for like the load times, the convenience, any console exclusives, and just doing this for my job. I kind of feel like I am obligated to get these consoles. But to be honest, it depends on, again, if you have that trained eye, and also do these load times that everyone is talking about, does the convenience factor play a role for you? I don't know. What were your thoughts, Jackson?
Yeah, Josh brings up a great point. First off, thanks, Brian, for that question. Just from a visual standpoint, I think you're going to notice a lot more with Xbox Series X. We just know that little things like ray tracing are going to be in there. So you're going to see things like that, even if you don't have HDR, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yep. Yeah.
No, I think ray tracing doesn't have anything to do with your TV.
Right. Exactly. So you're going to see that stuff. You're just not going to have the HDR. HDR is nice. I'm not going to pretend like it's not. But like Josh said, there's so many other advantages of next gen. So don't think that the lack of HDR is going to hold back at your experience. I don't think it will. And so to answer your question, I think it will be a big enough jump. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Well, again, thanks, Brian, for that question. And forgot to mention at the top of this segment, you can write into Preloaded at the email address preloadedpodcast@gmail.com. And we would love for any and all of you to send us your questions. We love reading them, and we love talking about them here on the show. So thanks again for the question. And with that, we are going to wrap things up. Again, if you're listening on any of the audio formats, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Stitcher, please subscribe and rate the podcast. If you're on YouTube, leave a comment, drop a like. Jackson, we already talked about some of the stuff we have on our channels. Anything you want to plug specifically?
Yes. So my 41 minute, long preview of Valhalla. Once again, check that out. I've got some secret Roman Assassin Bureau gameplay that I uploaded. I just got a lot more things that I'm sure will be up by the time this podcast airs. So go check out my channel for AC Valhalla coverage. And then also follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I'm jayvee on YT.
Nice. And on my channel, well, we're going to have this podcast on my channel now for at least a couple weeks, if not on into perpetuity. We're going to just experiment with how that works. And we hope to see you on both channels. But wherever you watch this podcast, we love seeing you. I will have some other content on my channel in the coming weeks, but it's stuff I can't talk about at the moment. So stay tuned. Definitely stay tuned to my channel. Hopefully next week I'll have a new video, if not the following week. And with that, and follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Quest Mode Games. And with that, we are all finished up with this week's episode. Again, thanks for listening. We will see you next week.
Bye, guys.